Good afternoon and welcome to Finding 50. This is going to be episode 3, and today I will be talking about how I met my husband, who indeed definitely showed narcissistic qualities, is that the right word? Traits maybe, because of the length of time that we were together and how much happened over the years. I have decided to split it and do it over a few parts. I'm going to try and condense it down into 3 separate parts, but it might end up being more, just depends. So in today's episode, part 1 will be how I met my narcissistic husband. I hope that you enjoy listening, watching. As usual, I do have some notes here. This time I'm going to try and just sort of look at my notes briefly and try and talk more to you, I think. And I'm hoping that if you are in a situation like I was, that this may come as some comfort and perhaps some support or help for you. Okay, so I was actually married to my husband for 12 years and we were together for about 22, so it was quite a long time. Now when I met him I was 19. The year was 1988, a pretty good year musically. I think for me, you know, as a 19-year-old, obviously I was going out quite a bit with friends. I had a really great job that I loved. I worked for a record merchandise company and I met my friend there, who actually knew my husband because she had been out with one of his friends and they kind of mixed in the same circle, so that is kind of the connection there. So anyway, it was 1988. I think it was like October or November time, if I remember rightly. So my friend, I'll call her Tina for now, and we went to the pub. I think it was after work. So round the corner from where we worked there was this great pub, so we used to go there quite a bit. So today really was no different. We had finished work, I think it was probably quite early actually, so we finished work and we decided to go for a drink. When we got in there, I don't know how long we were in there before Peter actually turns up. Of course he knows my friend Tina, and he had come in with his girlfriend, but obviously I didn't know that at the time because I didn't even know who he was. So I think he must have gone up the bar and then come and sat down between Tina and myself. He chatted to her, then obviously asked who I was, and we were just talking. Suddenly this girl walks past and looks at me and says, "Karen, what are you doing here?" And I knew her. And then she looked at Peter and she said something, oh, I can't remember now, and then she walked off, obviously going to the toilet or something like that. He turned to me, no word of a lie, and muttered the immortal words, "See that girl there? I gave her a first orgasm." And I remember it very well, and I remember laughing but thinking, okay, jerk. Now just makes me laugh thinking about it. And I think he came to talk to me a couple of times over the night, which clearly now looking back shows that he had very little regard for his girlfriend and certainly had no respect for the fact, you know, or for her feelings. And it's weird, isn't it, when you look back at something with more mature eyes, you suddenly see it as it really was. and not how you thought it was at the time. But at 19 I was still quite innocent, and I was very naive, and like relationship wise I was more interested, you know, going out, just having a good time with my friends really. I wasn't looking for a relationship of any sort. I'd kind of had like an on-off relationship with my next door neighbour's son. We were the same age, in some of the same classes together, but we'd never slept together or anything like that. It was just purely, I suppose, a childish relationship, but you know, I think we did have feelings for each other. But anyway, so as far as a proper relationship was concerned, I was very innocent and lacked experience. Peter was very worldly. He was very, very funny. He was very charming, and I suppose I got hooked in. So the next time we met, it was Christmas time at the same pub. Tina and I had just finished work again, and as usual on Christmas Eve, I think it was, we would go down the pub, have a few drinks, probably stay there pretty much most of the evening. So that's what we did. Peter and two of his friends, one of whom had been out with Tina a few years back, were there, and you know, we kind of said hello, and that they were doing their own thing, enjoying themselves in one part of the pub. Tina and I and a few other friends from work, I think, had joined at this point. So we were all having a drink and just enjoying it, and then he starts to talk to me, and we take a few photos and stuff like that. The atmosphere was pretty good, pretty much what you expect from Christmas Eve in a pub, and it was probably one of the best Christmas Eves I'd had for a long time. I think that's probably when we exchanged numbers, and I talked to him about the girl that he'd been with, which, let me just clarify, I said at the beginning that she called me by my name, and she knew me and I knew her, and that's because we used to play together when we were a lot younger, and I lived next door to her cousin at the time, so that's how we knew each other. So it's kind of weird, but anyway. So I talked to Peter on Christmas Eve, and I said, you know, but she's your girlfriend and I don't want to sort of get in any way, don't mind you chatting to me, that sort of thing. But he was very sure when he categorically told me that he had been trying his best to end the relationship for a good number of weeks, and she just wouldn't leave him alone. I didn't really know him, I didn't know her, like, you know, as an adult, and why wouldn't I believe him? Like I said, I was very naive looking back, but never mind. So I just believed him. Anyway, Tina and two of our other friends that we all worked with were moving into a house together. They were going to rent somewhere, so the rental contract had already been signed, and they were going to move in January of 1989. And somehow he got an invite. So Christmas came and went. Don't think I heard from him. I didn't contact him. And New Year came and went. Don't think we really talked much either. So I didn't really expect anything. I'd kind of just forgotten pretty much about him. So the party date arrived, and we were having a good time. We were setting up drinks, I was helping my friends, and you know, it was a really good vibe. And then I remember Tina saying, he's here, and I was like, who's here? She's like, Peter's here. I was like, oh, okay. So not thinking about it, he turned up with one of his friends, no girlfriend, and he was really chatty, very flirty, and we kind of sort of got on really well. I remember him making me sit on his lap and like talking to me, and then he was like kissing me, and I kept saying to him, so you're not with your girlfriend anymore? And he says, no, I'm not with her, but she doesn't seem to be getting the message. Again, why wouldn't I believe him? You know, he was telling me this, so I was just assuming he was telling me the truth. So I'm not quite sure what time, but suddenly things seem to be kicking off. And I remember there was a bit of a ruckus because the girlfriend turned up. I think she was yelling at him and he was yelling at her, and one of my friends said to him, you need to leave because it's not fair. You know, this is our party, you can't bring this to our sort of door. Now, I can't remember whether he left fully, but I do think that he told her, you know, you got to stop and you need to leave me alone, blah, 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 blah. And then I think he came back. But it was a long time ago. And I don't think I've written it all up in my diary of the time. So we left it at that. I didn't really hear from him for a little while after the party. Pretty much, I think, until mid-February time. Maybe the end of Feb, actually, thinking about it. And I remember talking to Tina at work about it, saying, oh God, you know, he's called me, you know, we've spoken a few times, blah, blah, blah. And she did say, or at least I think she said to me, just be careful, he's a bit of a flirt. And I was like, yeah, I know that, I can tell that he's a bit of a flirt. But I think I kind of liked it at that time. You know, what girl wouldn't? We all have a bit of attention, don't we? And like I said, I was very innocent, and I did like him. You know, he was funny. Like I said, he was funny, he was charming. So, and we were getting on really, really well. I think it must have been the end of February. And it was a Sunday morning. I do remember that much. I get a phone call and it's the girlfriend, Michelle. She said to me, I think we should meet. So I was like, oh, okay, if you want to meet, that's fine. And she said, it's gone past the stage of wanting to scratch your eyes out, but I just think we should meet. And then she said, you know, he still expects me to sleep with him. So I was like, oh, okay. So I was like, all right, what time do you want to meet and where? So she wanted to meet at the swimming pool car park around the corner from me. So I said, okay, I'll see you there. So I put the phone down. Bearing in mind we didn't have mobiles back in 1989. So it was the house phone. I then called Peter up and I told him. He went mad, so he phoned her and then he phoned me back. He said, you know, you're not meeting her, I've already told her. He said, you know, she's just obsessed with me and all this and I just can't get rid of her and I don't know what to do about it. So that was basically what had happened so far. And this was even before we'd gone on our first date, official date. You know, as I'm telling you this now, all I'm thinking about is like, oh my God, like there were so many signs really. So around March 1989, I got a phone call from Pete one evening saying, do you want to go out for a drink, like on a date kind of thing? And I was a bit nervous. Then he said that his friend is going too, so why don't I bring Tina along? Now at the time I suppose I didn't really think anything of it, but you know, if a guy asked me out now, you know, that I'd kind of seen around and then, you know, said, oh, we're going out with my mate, so bring your mate along. it would be a bit strange, but obviously at the time I was caught up in all the giddiness and excitement of meeting somebody and, you know, those new feelings, I suppose. So I didn't really say anything, and I remember calling my friend Tina on the phone, and I said, look, you know, he's asked me out, but his mate is going, please will you come along, please? And she was like, yeah, okay, because she still quite kind of liked him at the time, the other guy. So bless her, she drove over to me, because the pub that we were meeting at was literally just across the road from us, or from my parents' house. So she drove, we met them in there, and you know, I just remember that those feelings that you get, you know, when you first meet somebody, it's all exciting, isn't it? And it was a great evening, it was full of fun. And so my friend Tina ended up taking them home, and after all it was a really good night, so we really enjoyed it. I think the next couple of days Pete called me again, and we sort of arranged to meet up, and then we went round to Tina's house, I think, and I don't know what date it was, but it was sometime in March, and I think that was pretty much the first time that we slept together. He was my first boyfriend, so I wasn't really sure, you know, of what was going on or what was happening, and he was very, very knowledgeable. So, you know, it was a good night. But I ended up sleeping on the floor and he slept on the sofa. Now, again, when I look back to little things like that now, I think, oh my God, but I just didn't see it at the time. What sort of guy, you know, knowing full well that it was a girl's first time and your first time with her, that he had no care or consideration for me really, that he was quite happy to make me sleep on the floor and not even say no, you know, come on, we'll sleep together, we'll snuggle up. And you know, he never actually asked me how I felt, you know, considering it was my first time. And I think back now, and I remember being really scared and really cold, and I was shivering, and I remember that so vividly. And then, like, the next morning he left, and then I remember speaking to Tina about it and telling her everything, and she's like, oh my God. And you know, she's like, oh, I can't believe, like, you slept together and all this lot, and blah 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 blah. And I kind of didn't really have any expectations. I didn't know if he would speak to me again or whatever, really. I feel quite foolish saying it all, but just one of those things, I guess. I won't be the first girl to have done something so silly and so quick, and I definitely won't be the last, that's for sure. So he came round to my parents' house, I think a couple of days after that, and we sat on the bottom step of the stairs, and he said to me, what if the unmentionable happens? Obviously meaning pregnancy, because we hadn't even discussed anything beforehand. It was just, I think it just kind of happened. So I went to the doctors, went on the pill, and then we just started kind of going out together, I guess. No official announcement or anything, we just started dating. So over 1989 we pretty much went out probably twice a week, so once at the weekend, once in the week, but it was always to the pub round the corner from him, and he was wanting me to drive, and I had to pick him up and then drive him to the pub, drop him home, and then I'd go home myself. And it kind of started like that from day one. So let's face it, he was pretty consistent, and he pretty much displayed who he was from the outset, but I just didn't see it. Then we started to go out like with his friends as well, and Tina and a couple of others, and we'd go out kind of in a big group. And then Pete's ex-girlfriend kept joining us because she was still part of the group, and one of the girls that was her friend was seeing Pete's friend. So because she was there and they were good friends, Michelle had to keep coming along as well. And what was worse is, I remember one particular time is she drove us there. She drove like 4 of us there. And I think back to how like silly we both were, really. And now I think he must have really enjoyed that, because here he was with a new girlfriend, but his old girlfriend was taking us to the pub. I used to say to him, I don't like it, I don't like her coming along, you know, she's supposed to be your ex, she shouldn't be doing this, and she certainly shouldn't be driving us. And he'd just fob it off. He'd always make some sort of excuse and make it feel like I was being silly, like asking something completely unreasonable. But obviously I wasn't. Of course I wasn't. It was perfectly reasonable. Who wants to be the new girlfriend going out with the ex-girlfriend tagging along? You know, never mind what she must have been feeling. So yeah, it was incredibly awkward at times. And one particular time I remember very vividly, even now talking about it, I hadn't thought about it until I started writing all this up, and I was like, oh my God, that incident was horrendous. So we went off to this lovely pub. It's kind of in the middle of the countryside, just beautiful. It had a massive conservatory. It was a perfectly sunny day. We had gone, she had driven us. I didn't want to go, but he made like a big song and dance about it, and you know, declaring his love and everything else for me. So I think I felt bad and I went against my better nature. So I went with them. We all got there, and there was obviously some tension in the air, and they started having an argument. And full on in the pub, she chucked her glass of wine over him, or whatever she had. She had a glass of something, but it was small, and she chucked it over him. And he stood up, like the arrogant arse that he is, stood up and with his whole pint glass tipped it all over her head. And I remember everyone in the pub, and then she was going to go for him, and people were pulling them, like, you know, making sure nothing happened. And he said to her, you forget, I drink out of pints are much bigger than your glass. And it's just one of those things that sticks in my mind. And I was really upset at that, really upset. There was kind of so many emotions at the time. One, I was feeling embarrassed for her. I was feeling embarrassed for me as well, because everybody was looking. I felt stupid that I was still like with him at that point, but I don't know, it's hard to explain. I mean, everybody's been in love, haven't they, or lust or whatever, so you know those first few moments of when you're in a relationship with somebody, you're just starting out, it's all new, it's exciting, so you kind of get wrapped up. And when you're 19 and it's your first boyfriend, you know, I was quite relatively old, I suppose, having a first boyfriend that late, but that's just how it was. And I do forgive myself for being a little bit naive and silly, but it happened. There's nothing I can do about that now, but I can see this day like playing out. Anyway, she went home, her friend and her went home. I don't know whether the friend drove her home, I'm not sure. But you know, there was a lot of swear words and shouting and screaming and crying and everything. So yeah, it wasn't very pleasant. And we got a cab back, And to be honest, I think he was more upset with the fact he had to get a cab back than the fact that he just soaked a girl in the pub. And, you know, I get equal rights. She threw a drink over him first, but only because of something he said. Now, I can't remember what he said to her, but I think it was probably something derogatory, something totally disrespectful, probably involving me. I don't know. I can't remember, and I don't have it written down anywhere. I don't think I actually heard what he said, but I know that he said something, and knowing now what he's like, I'm pretty sure that he said something to her. So anyway, 1989 came and went, and I was introduced to like more of his friends from his early apprenticeship days, and they were great. We got on really, really well. We hit it off, and our relationship kind of solidified, I suppose, in 1990. But a lot of these friends were starting to get married, and some of my friends were getting married too. So wedding after wedding we attended, and it was here that I got to meet another one of his exes. I'll call her Liz, and her son, who I will call Lee. Turns out that that was Peter's son as well. So, I mean, he was pretty much transparent about things like that straight away, but I didn't really kind of expect to meet her. But she was the sister of like his friends that were getting married, and he'd had a thing with her a few years back. As a result, Lee arrives. So I meet her and him, and over the next, I suppose over the course of 1990 and some of 91, we were attending weddings, and she was always there because obviously she was in that group of friends as well. So it's like, great. So now I'm having to meet her, and she was, you know, nice. We got on, but there was always a bitchy comment or something. She'd always say something about, you know, how lovely I looked. Now I know that sounds weird because it's like a compliment, but it was the way she said it. It was like, oh, you look nice as always. And it's the way she said it. If you're female, you will totally understand. It's funny now I think about it, but I just remember thinking, oh God, here we go again. And actually I remember one of his friends being privy to that comment, and he was like, ooh, someone's a bit jealous. And, you know, I was like, yeah, I know, like every time we meet she says something, and he was saying, don't worry about it, it's fine, you know, she's no sort of threat to you, and Pete loves you, and blah blah blah, he's totally obsessed with you, and he's definitely met his match in you, etc, etc, etc. So I didn't really bother about it too much. There was another pub that we really liked to go to, and we met some other friends there. Tina used to come along, and her sister would come along, and then she had a couple of friends as well, so we'd all go out together. And then we met another girl there and her boyfriend, so we kind of all got on. It was a nice little group that we had. And then I think it was that year, I'm not really sure, it might have been 1990 actually, his parents went on holiday, and Pete decided to have like a little get together. So we invited a few people, not too many, it wasn't a lot, and I think we just got a takeaway and some booze in. Nothing, you know, major, no major party or anything. But his parents' house, in the hallway, they had like one of those opaque windows in the hall, so you could see straight through to the lounge. You know, you could see outlines, you couldn't see faces as such, but you could tell who people were. And I remember at that little get together, I'd gone to the toilet. When I came down, as I was coming down the stairs, I looked into the window and I could see two shapes. One was him and one was this new girl that was in our group, and it was clear he was much closer than he should have been. Now whether he was kissing her or what, I don't know. I can't really tell and I can't really remember, but I just know how close they were. And then other people were going in and out from the kitchen to the lounge, so nothing more happened. I did question him about it, and he just denied everything, made it feel like I was going mad and that I was being stupid. So that was another incident, basically. At this other pub, I will call the Oak. So at this pub, the Oak, where we used to go probably Fridays and Saturdays, we used to have a really good laugh, and slowly I noticed that if Pete and I would go like on our own, he would get up to go to the bar, like to get a drink, and I wouldn't see him for like ages, and I'd be thinking, well, where is he? Sometimes he'd be over talking to like loads of girls in a group, like they'd met just outside the toilet, you know, they're all together, and he'd be like chatting away to them, flirting away, which made me mad, as it would. Other times he'd be on the fruit machines, just playing on them for ages, regardless of the fact that I was just sat there on my own. Luckily there were people that we knew sort of by this time, so it wasn't too bad, but nevertheless we went in there together. We were supposed to be having a night together, and he'd spent half of it away from me. Now either I'm a completely disgusting person to be in the company of, or he's just an arse. I like to think the latter, but anyway, I did notice that we never actually went out for meals or anything like that. It was always to the pub, and normally resulted in me driving. So I remember saying to him, can't we go to a pub and have a meal, or can't we go to a restaurant and do something different? Why has it always got to be out for a drink? It's always the same. And I think he was pretty like, oh wow, I don't really like doing things like that. Again, another kind of narcissistic trait, that why should I do that? It's not what I want to do, so why are we doing it? It's kind of that behaviour. Admittedly, we did go to have a few meals, and we went out with some of my friends and, you know, their partners, and that was quite nice actually. It was a bit more of a nicer evening, I think, than just going to the pub and getting drunk. It was nice to have proper conversation and just have that social scene, I think, with a big group of people. I liked those nights better, but they were few and far between, which is quite sad really. I found out that year that he actually suffered from epilepsy, and he used to have nighttime seizures. So he had fallen out of bed and sort of cracked his nose and his mouth. I think that was one of the first times that myself and his mum kind of got to know each other a bit better. He was a bit of a mess. I never actually witnessed any fit at that time, so I only ever saw the after effect. I think it was 2 or 3 maybe that he'd suffered, but this one was particularly bad, where he'd fallen on his keyboard when he fell out of bed straight onto his face. So yeah, bit of a mess. So because of that, I obviously didn't really mind driving, because I thought, well, you know, although he never had daytime fits, he didn't really want to drive. He didn't really like driving that much, so I was quite happy to do it at first. Now, he said, you know, he didn't really bother too much about driving, but he didn't like being a passenger either, and he certainly made me know it. Now, the nitpicking started in the car, bits here and there, messing with my radio, too loud, too soft, too cold, too hot, you know, adjusting the thermostat. He'd be like pressing my indicators up and down like that. Well, you need to indicate to turn left, you need to do this, you need to do that. and he was always fidgeting, like fidgeting with the seatbelt or watching what I was doing, and it used to irritate me, but it didn't really get to me too much. After all, I was driving and it was my car, so I just thought, well, you know, if you don't like it, get out and walk. I'm here picking you up, taking you to places, so get over it. Some of the friends that I'd met in his circle lived sort of all over the place. One lived in Kent, I think one lived in Leeds, so we were kind of arranging times like to go up to them or down to them to see, you know, to see them and spend like weekends with them. So that was quite good, you know, I was quite excited about doing things like that. I think I had a metallic green Fiesta at the time, like the proper old shape, you know, the nice shape. And yeah, I really loved that car and I loved driving it, I really enjoyed it. But he was always commenting, like, I think we went to see one of our friends in Kent one weekend. I drove and he was just picking like all the way. It was just little bits and pieces. And then, you know, would come back from that weekend and I'd feel a little bit exhausted by it, I think. But even if we went out, you know, and I'd take him to the pub, because that's kind of how it was starting to feel, like I was picking him up and taking him out. It was never he'd come to me, pick me up and take me out for the night. And I started to get, I suppose, a little bit fed up of it. So, you know, in the car situation, it wasn't just all the fidgeting and the touching all the buttons, it was the comments. So comments like, oh, watch that car, oh, what are you doing, brake, change gear, you're in the wrong gear, you know, put your brake on. It was like that sort of thing. Oh, you've got to indicate, don't indicate there. It was never good enough. And then like he used to say things like, Jesus, where'd you get your driving licence? Off the back of a cereal packet. And I think after a while, you know, alongside the nitpicking and, you know, that these comments were sinking in slowly but surely. I guess it was a bit like drip feed torture. Like I said, a lot of our friends were getting married, and as the year was coming to a close, 1990, I started to look at the relationship and think, you know, all these people, they're all like getting married, they've got kind of some sort of firm basis for their relationship, and I didn't feel very settled with him. I kind of felt a little bit unsure. And then some of these friends were, obviously because if they get married, they were getting on the property ladder too. So slowly but surely our group became smaller, and more of these friends were less able to go out because obviously financially, especially back in the 90s, you know, things were very expensive, and you know, a few of our friends went into negative equity and they were desperately trying to sort all that out, so they didn't have time or the money to go out. And I think our group kind of disbanded and it ended up just being me and him. We didn't have a place together, we hadn't been on holiday, we'd not really done anything of any significance. And when I compare that to now, okay, I'm a lot older, but the relationship that I've got with Dan is so different, because like literally within I think 8 months of meeting, we'd gone on our first holiday together to Tenerife, and after that we were going away quite a bit weekends, or would go on day trips, and he always made sure, you know, that he looked after me, and still does. So that's a proper relationship. And I think it's now that when I look back at that, I realise that I didn't have the relationship that I think I deserved from the outset. But by this time I was too involved. I was like completely smitten, head over heels, stupid. So 1991 arrives. This was quite a big year for both of us. He continued nitpicking at every opportunity, but I didn't kind of let it bother me. It sort of, I suppose, washed over me quite a bit, thankfully. And I was getting fed up with the job I was in, and his sister worked at a really great place. It was a good opportunity, more money, so I'd gone for the interview, got the job, and was going to start in September. You know, like I said, be more money, we could actually start saving, and I thought this would be great. Now we could perhaps save and we could get a place of our own. And then he drops the bombshell that he doesn't want to stay at work anymore. He's disillusioned with his job. He wants to go and get a degree. So I was like, oh, okay, fair enough. You know, he's still young, I suppose, but you know, by this time we'd been together 2 years now, 2 and a bit years. So I think I kind of thought, looking around at everybody else, some of our friends who had known each other less time than we had were married or getting on the property ladder. So I think it was quite hard for me to see that and look at our own relationship and think, what exactly are we doing? And now you're going off to uni. So I wasn't the best pleased, I must admit, because it meant he would have to leave his job, and he had a really good, well-paid job. He was learning a great skill, but he didn't want to stay there. He had a massive row with his dad over it, and it wasn't a very pleasant time. But anyway, that's what he was going to do. So, you know, so with him and the way he is, the narcissistic side, I guess if he wants to do it, he's going to do it, and no one's going to stop him, and that's that. Anyway, in the September of 1991, I went on my first holiday to Tenerife, and I went with 3 of my friends who weren't married or anything else, so we had an absolute scream. It was just the best experience and so much fun. He missed me like crazy, so I think it kind of solidified us. So when I came back from Tenerife, all nice and refreshed, I started my new job. Pete went off to university to start his degree. So I really loved the job. I was learning quite a lot, and it really made me grow up a hell of a lot. I think this was my defining job. So at 21, I was, you know, far more mature than I'd been in recent years, and like I said, I felt I grew up massively there. I worked in a small office in part of this company, and his sister was my boss, like she was the manager of the office. I guess at times the atmosphere in the office was very stressful, so it kind of had an effect on me. It rubbed off on me, definitely, and made me quite stressed, but I didn't really notice. Now Pete was at uni. He'd been there, I suppose, a term and a bit, and he was commuting at this point, so I think he was finding that a little bit difficult, because he lived, well, we both lived like in outer London, and he was travelling to inner London, you know, on the tube and everything else, etc, etc. He is a bit of a stress head too, so I think it was starting to get to him. He was always tired, and as a result from that, and this, I think, coupled with the lack of money now because he didn't have a job, I think it just exacerbated his moods, and he started to pick more so. So when we did get together, he was moany, miserable, just, he was not really a pleasure to be around. And I think after a while you kind of think, oh, do I actually want to see him tonight? I'm not really sure I do. You know, what are we going to do? We couldn't really go out much anymore because he didn't have any money. And now I was earning more money, but I was finding that I was giving him money. Because you do, don't you? Your partners, you're supposed to be in this together. And he'd say comments like, well, you know, I'm doing this for our future. If I get my degree, or when I get my degree, you know, we will have so much money and we can do so much more. We can get a house together and blah, blah, blah. So I think that kind of kept me dangling quite a bit. It made me think, oh, you know, there is a future and he does love me. And, you know, if I just keep working with him, then obviously it's going to get better for both of us. So that is what I did. But I think this is when I started to get into a little bit of a situation with money, started to have a few debts. I think I took out a couple of loans because I was trying to help him and buying books and things like that for him, and these books that he needed were really expensive. But he said, I don't want to ask my mum and dad because they won't help me, you know, they didn't want me to go back to uni in the first place, but I need all this, otherwise I can't study. And he would say things that would make me feel guilty if I didn't help him, and I felt I didn't really have a choice. So as the stress from him and trying